you get really good black belts who will go in a scarf hold and they don't last any period of time in it. And then I'll go in that same scarf hold just to show them. It's not that I know any more techniques than them, but I just know how to breathe in it. And you go in that same scarf hold and I'll just lay there. And I can lay there for rounds now doing that. And I'm somebody who has 2 inhalers for their asthma that I no longer now use. But that's the dramatic difference this has made. And if you put me in that same situation a few months before, I would have lasted just as long as, those brown and black belts that get put in that scarf hold. It's mind-blowing what it can do for you.
A pleasure to talk to you. I was actually already thinking about this conversation for a while, ever since I saw your videos about the breathing and how it influenced initially your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game, but now we kind of had a short chat before having this on record, and it seems like it's been changing various aspects of my life. So I was really looking forward to talk to you, and I'm so happy that we just made it happen so fast. So I appreciate that you have the opportunity. And there's a bunch of questions I want to ask, but the first question I'd like to start with, it's just because of how the world works these days. There's so much out there, and I think it just gives confidence for people when they know a little bit about the background of the speaker, so that they would know who is talking and that there's weight behind it. Maybe you could give a few kind of ideas of what's your experience and where your knowledge comes from, and just like your background.
Yeah, sure. So I've been training, really I started mixed martial arts rather than BJJ, but I've been training mixed martial arts about 20 years. So I started at Lee Hasdall's. So Lee Hasdall was the first sort of professional British mixed martial arts fighter in rings, Japan. And his main student was Danny Batten, who ran most of the classes at the time. And Danny fought successfully with people with John Kavanagh. So he fought John Kavanagh back in the day. He was a Cage Warriors world champion. So he was fantastic. He brought over a guy called Eduardo Cariello, who now runs Gracie Barra London Bridge. And so he was living with Danny when he was sort of first getting established in the UK. And so trained a lot with Danny and Eduardo. And then effectively met my wife, ended up relocating up to the north of England. Started training with an affiliate of Carl Tanswell. And then I booked 5 one-hour private classes with him in Manchester, and went in and trained with him every day. And pretty much decided there and then I wanted to try and locate myself in such a way to be able to work and to train with him. So fast forward, qualified as an MMA instructor under him in, I think it was like 2000 and something. I think I got my brown belt under him like about 2009, I think, something like that. I think black belt was like 2013. So I think I'm in my 7th year now as a black belt. And then relating to breathing, and I suppose the main sort of topic of conversation, got a chance to go to a seminar in Portland, Oregon, where Rickson Gracie was. I said to my wife, I remember it's kind of a life-changing thing. I sort of read the email came through from Matt's, from Zach, saying, Rickson Gracie, blah, blah, blah. I said to my wife, God, I'd love to go to that. And she said, well, why don't you go, right? You only live once. I probably wouldn't have gone otherwise. And she said, you should go. So I went out there for the week, and it was an amazing week, in Portland with Matt and Rick and John Hobson and all those guys, and Zach. And went to the seminar, and Rickson basically said, opening line, won't forget it, the single biggest thing you can do for your life, for your jiu-jitsu, everyone asks about techniques and so on, single biggest thing you can do is learn how to breathe effectively. And I got to do a few things with Rickson. He happened to just pull me out of the group. There must have been over 150 people there, but I got to just feel, you really do need to feel his pressure and his base and just how he does things. So, you know, I mean, I've done judo to a reasonable level. I've competed in judo in like the English Open and stuff like that. And Rickson's base is just phenomenal. Like really just, he has incredible base. It's very hard. And by that, I mean, it's very hard to move him in standing. You push and pull. His base is just incredible. So that I think makes a difference if you can actually feel what he does. And he also he showed us some stuff where I was mounted on top of him and he played this game where I was trying to touch his head and I just couldn't touch his head even from mount top. And he was hitting me, like bitch slapping me like this with one hand going, you know, come on, man, and all this sort of thing. And it was just mind blowing. We were all kind of mind blown by just things he did. He mounted he pulled out a 50-degree black belt. I don't know who the chap was, but the guy's belt was in tatters and he pulled him out of the crowd. And it's, you know, a common thing he does now where he, you know, says, oh, you know, I'll be mounted on you. And he mounts on top of the black belt. And the black belt's going crazy trying to get out. Rickson just doesn't appear to be even moving. I mean, he's just not moving at all. He's not going to technical mount or S mount or any of these. He's just in regular mount, not moving. And the guy's thrashing around. He's like, oh, yeah, you know, nice, switches it over and just basically hurls this guy, just throws him, just literally threw him from mount bottom. And so you start to look at that and go, wow, that's incredible. And then afterwards, we were in the bar and there was myself and Travis and John Diggins. And John Diggins asked us, a few other guys as well, you know, what was the most important thing? I think he actually asked, what was the most important thing? And Travis was like, wow, you know, this particular thing that he showed, you know, I was talking about, I was amazed by like the mount and all of these things. I think Travis said, you know, you watch some of it and you start seeing that, you know, there's some really good black belts there. And yet there's some really basic things that like, they don't necessarily know how to do like Rickson can do. And so we all talked about all of that. And then I think Travis turned it back on John and said, what did you think, John, was the most important bit? And John said, well, you know, if you think about it, he spent the first hour talking about breathing of the 3-hour seminar. So he put it first. He actually said at the beginning, this is the most important bit that I can tell you. So, you know, I have to conclude that the most important thing he showed us today was the breathing, which was funny because I think, you know, Diggins brought it back to the fact that we all got really excited by the techniques, which is exactly what Rickson said, don't do. And then, you know, as we were talking about before, it then took me 3 years to really do anything about breathing after that. So it was only about a year ago I really started to get into it. And that was just because Henry Akins, who, you know, obviously famous instructor, you know, maybe the best, like one of the best jiu-jitsu coaches out there right now, if not it. And, you know, he said he brought in a breathing coach. And I thought, well, that's really interesting because like Rickson's like, you know, the breathing messiah in jiu-jitsu. And there's Henry bringing in this breathing coach, you know, Dr. Bliss of Ranich. And so I thought, well, if, you know, he's brought her in, she must really know about this. Yeah. So I just started Googling, downloaded the book, started reading the book, thought this is really interesting, messaged her and just said, I really like your book. And she offered to do like a Facebook live stream with us. And I'd said to her, I'd got all the people in the club to download the book because I said, you know, I'm going to make this now that there's one thing we're going to do as a club better than anybody else. We're going to breathe better because if this is the thing Rickson says it is, and like, you know, Henry's now, you know, he's not really shown too much on the breathing side, but he's discussed it and he's had her in and he's doing the seminars on it. Well, he's still massively into this, and everything I've ever sort of seen with Henry has been really fantastic. So like, we've got to do this. This is going to be our priority. So a load of us went and downloaded the book on Audible. You get it. I think you get it free. The original book she did called Breathe, you get it free with Audible. So we all downloaded it, read it, tried to swat up on it, practiced the stuff she said in the class, and then did the live stream with her. And she did like Q&A with us for about an hour and a half. And then she recently launched her certification program, I think a few months back online. And I thought, yeah, I'm always kind of doing courses and things like that. So I did a course not that long ago on blockchain. Haven't really done anything particularly on it in terms of practical things in business, but I go and do these courses. You know, you can now do these courses at Oxford University, Cambridge, Stanford, whatever, these applied courses, and I think they're great. They fast track you, and it seemed to be a similar kind of layout, online training. So I thought I'll do the course, and it's been a gradual process where I developed asthma, and I think looking back on it, it was definitely sports induced, and it didn't really seem to happen until I was in my first recollections of it, late 20s, and I was just finding that in roles, I used to blast through people in my 20s, like just athletically. I probably wasn't as technical as I could have been, but I was training all the time, so it didn't matter. But I just suddenly found I was just couldn't breathe. That's all I could describe it as. And I was getting sort of asthmatic attacks. Dust would set it off. Animals suddenly would set it off. And I never, ever had any of this. And so I felt like it was one of these things that as the breathing problems were getting worse and worse and were impacting me more and more, I needed to do something about it. And I now, although I'm no doctor and I can't say to somebody, I would never try to pretend that, anything I say should be taken for medical advice. But for me personally, I think I've started to realize that, medicine has not been particularly good in helping people with asthma. It tends to be here's medicine. And the more you go and delve into all of this sort of area around breathing, there's like this Russian method. I don't know if you've heard about it. I think I don't even know the pronunciation of it because I've only ever read about it, but I think it's called the Buteyko method. But it's essentially an emphasis on not breathing through your mouth and trying to breathe, like an emphasis on nasal breathing. And then a lot of philosophy and scientific argument about why you should nasal breathe and some other things that they talk about as well. But I'm now convinced that a lot of asthma, not all of it, but a lot of asthma, particularly in athletes, is being caused by just a complete misunderstanding of how to breathe effectively. That and a bit of arrogance sometimes as well, if I'm honest. So a lot of athletes, I think, misunderstand how you breathe, and you'll see this in almost every MMA fight. You'll see that the fighter comes to they go to the corner at the end of it, and the coach says, take a big breath, and they do this posturing, this sort of signaling of like breathing up into your chest, which is completely incorrect. And you watch the fight, and 9 times out of 10 there's something like this where they go and then they go, and it's just about the worst thing that they could possibly have done. They've been breathing into the wrong part. They're not using their diaphragm, they're breathing into their chest, which anatomically it's anatomically incongruous, because essentially the alveoli that sit at the bottom of your lungs that bring all the oxygen in, they're at the bottom, they're at the base of your lung. So thinking about your lung being down at the base, down by your belt line, and then being like almost like 2 traffic cones going up to this sort of point at the top of the clavicle, and all the alveoli is down in the base. So they're taking this big mouth breath in, and then they sort of do a kind of pissy breath out, for want of a better word. And what they really want to be doing then is clearing everything out. It's the exhale that's really important, because the problem with fighters is, or any athlete, you have this concept in your head that you want to be getting as much air in. And actually, in actual fact, your body doesn't need as much air in as it believes it does. As Hickson talks about, the emphasis really for, in terms of recovery, should be on the exhale. However, there are some subtleties that I think around grappling that I'm starting to feel in my own game in terms of breathing for it, which Belisa Vranic got me onto, which is about bracing methods. And this is really around that when I'm in holds, so when I'm holding somebody or they're holding me, and we're not really moving a great deal, we're in a kind of anaerobic situation, then we want more of a bracing approach to breathing. and not this big emphasis on the exhale. The exhale is really, for me, in the transitions, when we're moving around freely. That's where there's an emphasis on exhale. But once we get into a clinch where we're moving each other's weight, like Dave Camarillo says, we lift humans, right, in jiu-jitsu. You know, we lift humans. When we're in that grappling situation, this is anaerobic. And I think that I'm currently experimenting with a different type of breathing technique again. But none of what I'm talking about has anything to do with the terrible breathing methods that most athletes are using across the world in all disciplines.
Can you explain a little bit what you mean by bracing method?
Yeah, so basically, if you look at how powerlifters breathe, and powerlifters, there are differences in even how some powerlifters talk about breathing compared to others. But essentially, there's a technique that some powerlifters call, I think they call it Valsalva method, but essentially it's a breath hold. Essentially, they hold their breath. And so you'll see these guys when they do world record attempts for deadlifts and squats, you know, blood pouring from their nose, where effectively they've built up so much internal pressure. So you effectively imagine you're filling your belly up as much as you can with air, and then you're holding your breath. Yeah, or anyone who's ever done squats, right? You typically will get a personal trainer who will kind of give you the idea that you inhale on the way down and you exhale on the way up. But typically, a lot of people hold their breath. And the basic idea is that, yes, you do want to hold you do want to effectively fill your belly up, fill your diaphragm up and hold your breath is actually a good thing to do when you're trying to move weight, because it gives your spine something to brace against. So a good analogy that Belisa Vranic got me onto on this, which explains it perfectly, is if you think about, she talks about a soda can, or we call it like a Coke can, right? So you've got a can of Coke. Now you think about when that can of Coke is full of liquid, it's almost impossible to crush, right? I mean, you've got to have like, you know, it's almost like a gripping feet to make it burst, right? Now you think about that can when it's empty. You can crush the can really easily when there's no liquid in it. Well, this is the same with us with air. So when we don't have any air inside of us, if we're emphasizing only the exhale, when we're breathing out all the time, our spine can be compressed very easily. If I fill my diaphragm up, my spine is very difficult to compress. Like anybody's spine is very difficult to compress. So when you think about this in just to give one example, and I have a whole thing on this that I've kind of developed and I'm developing, but if you think about in scarf hold, I think my theory is, and one of the major reasons that a lot of people tap to a well-applied scarf hold is because they've actually exhaled. The results you'll get are even like without even any real breathing expertise. If you inhale heavily and fill your belly up and hold your breath and try to escape a scarf hold, you'll actually last longer than you will if you've exhaled, all things being equal. You'll like, even if you didn't try to escape, you just try to survive it. So one of the things I have with people is I frequently I'll talk about breathing and people will say, yeah, I know. And also the higher jiu-jitsu grades they are, I tend to find that the higher grade they are, the more they do one or two things. And not everyone, but a lot. And more so than white belts or blue belts, or you go up the grades. Black belt will say, I know about breathing. You don't need to tell me anything about it. And they'll shut you down, right?
Okay.
That's one you get, right? I've done it all before. I've done this in other martial arts as well. I've studied what Hicks and said. Fine. And then you get the other side where they'll sort of like joke about it and say, well, yeah, it's kind of pretty obvious, isn't it? Well, yeah, it is. You know, and they'll say, well, because, you know, if you stop breathing, you die. And it's like, well, yeah, but like, okay, so like, what do you know about breathing? And you never really get a straight answer on it. I find people get egotistical over it. And, you know, maybe I do this on other things and we all get our attachments, but I find that the best way to test it is to put that person in the scarf hold. I find scarf hold, knee on belly is pretty good, but scarf hold's the best. You put them in scarf hold and you say, right, I don't want you to escape to begin with. I don't want you to escape. I just want you to see how long you can go with someone applying what I call the soul stealer, what Henry Aiken says, the soul stealer, right? And you see how long they can last in there. And we're pretty good at this at my club. And we do have, you know, brown and black belts regularly come. Some just come from other clubs and train. We're pretty open. And, you know, you get really good black belts who will go in a scarf hold and they don't last any period of time in it initially. And then I'll go in that same scarf hold just to show them. It's not that I know any more techniques than them, but I just know how to breathe in it. And you go in that same scarf hold and I'll just lay there. And I can lay there for rounds now doing that. And I'm somebody who has 2 inhalers for their asthma that I no longer now use. But that's the dramatic difference this has made. And if you put me in that same situation a few months before, I would have lasted just as long as, you know, those brown and black belts that get put in that scarf hold. It's mind-blowing what it can do for you. And part of what it does is, so one, as we were sort of talking about a little bit before, so one, it completely changes your posture. In every position, there is an optimal way to breathe. It's not unique to every position, but there are, for me, nuances around. There are subsets of positions where you'll do certain things certain ways. So there's times when I will look to what I would call still breaths, where I'll emphasize my exhale. And there's other times where I will, like, bracing position, so scarf hold bottom. Scarf hold bottom, there is a time to exhale, and there is a time not to exhale if you don't want to just burn yourself out and end up potentially submitting just to pressure. And once you show that to people, you can have a white belt a white belt who's practiced this regularly can lay in scarf hold for a hell of a long time. And their only danger then is submission. It's not, they're not going to tap to pressure once they've learned and mastered how to breathe and got used to it. So that's a big impact. And the other thing we talked about is the impact it has on memory when you're rolling. So because when you're breathing effectively, you're controlling your heart rate, and your emphasis is on controlling your heart rate. And it's not, if you really prioritize breathing, it then starts to become, when you roll, it actually becomes a war about the heart rate, which is something Hickson talks about. So if you go back through Hickson's seminars that are online, he frequently, when he talks about breathing, he talks about the fact that he would keep his heart rate 30 beats per minute less than his opponent. And he felt this was his biggest advantage, not any techniques, nothing. The breathing was the big advantage that he had over him. And so the benefit that really gives you in your general role is, if you're not attached to submitting somebody, you suddenly your game becomes, I think, more expansive. And you notice far more of what your opponent is doing, your partner. You notice their breathing rate, their heart rate. You start finding there are things that you can do that really annoy them. And when you annoy your opponent, and I don't mean like you're pinching their nipples or sticking your elbow in their leg, right? I mean, you just like can find ways of just, you know, you'll get the grip and you'll lift their chin up, and they'll break your grip really hard. And you start to, I just found I started rolling a lot more like, if you ever get to roll with Casey Jones, he rolls very slowly, very deliberately. He's not too attached. Yeah. He's just going to try and grind you over time.
Yeah, I've been there.
And Frankel, John Frankel's probably the best example. You know, he literally, if you want a grip, he'll let you have the grip. It's almost like he can let you have whatever you want. He plays the game. If you can have whatever you want, but he's not really going to allow you to use it against him, is how I would describe rolling with him. So he doesn't really have any major attachment to anything. If you want to pass his guard, he'll let you pass his guard. If you want to mount him, he'll let you mount him. If you want to take his back, he'll let you take his back. But he'll use it against you a lot of the time. And what I feel is happening with John, and I know John's worked a lot on his breathing, but he was doing this a long time ago. But what I feel like you end up rolling like John does, where it becomes this very cerebral process where you're noticing everything that's going on. And that's a very different type of rolling to rolling competitively, where you're rolling with someone who's ripping your grip off. You know, you go to grab their collar and it's like this. And you start noticing, if you're keeping yourself calm, you'll start noticing how much energy they put into things that just aren't that important. And so you start memorizing more and more of the role. And I also video my roles now as well for the same process. And so breathing helps your memory. It helps you to notice far more of what's going on. It slows down the rate of which you move, and you start finding ways of doing far more with less. So for me, it's definitely been the single biggest thing I've done for my jiu-jitsu. And I try and double that up with, I try and record everything. So I record all the coaching that I do. I record all of the rolls and isolation rounds that I do, and I watch them back. And so I'm far more present when this is happening. And then when I'm watching this back, I'm replaying everything again. And then my mind's going, oh yeah, that felt like that here. And this is where I did this. And this is where he did that. And look at how he did this. I'll look at where I struck. Oh, that's where he passed my guard. So I've got this kind of 3D of it. And it's more important for me. I used to play chess. So I played chess at like a pretty decent level as a kid. And we had the chess machines. I had the early chess machines. We used to write down all our moves. You'd write down all your moves, everything that you did. You'd record it all. You'd go back. And the reason the chess machines are winning now is because they're beating all the masters, is they have basically unlimited memory. If you really want to get it down, they have unlimited memory. They have no attachment to what they believe is the game. They're not even trying to win. They're trying to not lose. That's how these chess machines start, right? They start off by trying not to lose, and they gradually falsify their way to the truth. Whereas chess players don't do that, really. Sure. They try to mimic, but they're attached. So I don't know, have you seen the documentary, Rokas, on Netflix? I think it's called AlphaGo. It's on the, it's about basically, so there's the original one, Game Over, with Garry Kasparov against IBM's machines when they first started beating him. And then more recently, of course, Google's now developed this machine learning, which was the original one, I think was AlphaZero. I may have this wrong, but basically the Alpha chess machine went and played Stockfish 8, the greatest chess machine that there's ever been, before Google's machine learning was actually learning Pac-Man and other things. And they're trying to get to this world of cross-dimensional application of knowledge. That's where Google's really trying to get to, an AI that learns laterally rather than, down a vertical and can't really do anything more. So Google going, build this chess machine. It just plays itself billions and billions of times. No experts are involved in its development, unlike IBM's machines. And it basically goes and beats Stockfish 8, which is the best chess machine there's ever been, with all the greatest players. Matches have effectively been programmed into it. And this machine's only for that. And it's the best of the best chess machine. And there's no grandmasters beat one of these machines since 2009. So I think that in this kind of roundabout loop, I think there's this element that breathing is the closest way we've got as humans, along with recording everything we possibly can and watching it back and correcting our mistakes and trying to make it this autonomous machine type approach to learning things. This is kind of the best way we can learn to get better at jiu-jitsu faster is memory. So it all ties in for me.
One thing you mentioned, and there's a bunch of ideas or things you say where I kind of pick up, and I just want to ask a bit more about it. One of those things you mentioned, there's certain positions where you said you focus more on breathing out, and certain positions where you're doing the bracing. Could you give a few examples of which positions you would be focusing more on breathing out?
Yeah, so from personal perspective, when I get to close guard a lot of the time, particularly if I've recovered, that's where I will begin. I will exhale. So anything where we've expended a load of energy, and closed guard's usually one that you recover to close guard. So you have had to fight a little bit more. You've carried someone's weight for a long time. So you get back to closed guard. That's usually a position where I will try and, there are certain postures I'll hit, but I will try and focus on exhale and just getting everything possible that I can out. And the major device you can use to improve your exhale, which Ballista talks about a lot in a book, is balloons, right? So you've got these. Have you seen Bas Rutten's Inspirator?
I know of it. Yeah.
So there's all these different ones. There's different companies that make them, but all of those devices only work on the inhale, which is great. I mean, they're great devices. I've started playing with Baz's device, and it's excellent. And it's really interesting. The devices are very interesting for your showing you actually what part of your diaphragm predominantly inhales and which part of it exhales. So even though I've been playing around with this for quite a long time now, when you get the inhale device, you really feel the inhale works this kind of line at the very top of your diaphragm. So just below my sort of SBG, I don't know if you can see here, I'm going to have to zoom out, but it's kind of like this top part. And then I find the exhale is much lower down, you know, the area around your sort of belly button surrounding that. And you can start to feel that happening. Yeah, so in terms of the positions, like definitely like scarf hold, I really want to be bracing in scarf hold. So my emphasis is on inhale and exhaling as much as I need to, but not like, you know, like, so the idea is full inhale into the lower part and as much exhale, only as much exhale as I need to stay calm. And as they start pulling and trying to crunch you, that's, if you do feel that your body's going, that is your time to exhale. So if somehow they're so strong, I've not really had this happen recently, but let's imagine they really are strong and you're really tired and they go to do the soul stealer where they really try and ball you up. That's the time that if you have to, you're going to exhale and go with it, because it's going to allow you to fold further, right? But I've still then got to try and get my inhale back, brace and open up. If I'm in, so by the same token, anything where I am in positions where my arm is being, you know, arm triangles, any of the triangle positions, again, bracing techniques are really where we want to be looking to go to. Anything where I'm kind of wanting to let my weight go, like, so, you know, where I'm, you know, Matt has this position where he gets mounted on somebody and he just lets his body kind of flop. That's, you know, if you're tired, you do need to exhale. The challenge with bracing is that it's anaerobic. It's going to rob you of energy. You're going to tire. You know, it's that whole kind of process. You start producing a lot of carbon dioxide. You've got to get the carbon dioxide out of your system. And so obviously emphasis on exhale. In the end, there is that tight. So there's a trade-off. It feels like it's a kind of anaerobic, aerobic trade-off. So if I'm going running, my emphasis is on, if I'm going running, my emphasis is going to be on exhale. I don't want to over breathe in, you know, and there's lots of tricks that until you experience them that Bliss has shown me, that until you actually experience them, you don't realize, for example, how much extra air your body holds in anyway. Your mind tells you all kinds of nonsense excuses, like when we're all going to quit, you might, it doesn't matter, you know, it won't matter having that extra beer or whatever, right? And I usually think, it won't matter and I will have that extra beer. But yeah, that voice that kind of kicks in that you don't want to give up, or, you know, that temptation that says, oh yeah, you deserve this, you deserve to tap out here, whatever. You start to realize that your brain will say to you when you're doing a lot of these breathing exercises, oh, you need more air. But actually, when you learn this particular trick, you discover, actually, I don't need any more air. My body's actually holding a ton more air, but my mind is saying to me, I need to breathe in. So like I could show you one now, right?
Yeah,
that can. So if you do a full, just inhale for me as much as you can into your belly. I'm not too worried about the technique, right? But I want you to breathe in, and then I want you to hold your nose in this case and do a long exhale, right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to basically hold. Let me just see if I can show you this. I'll try and do it, right? Yeah. So I breathe in, and I'm going to exhale for as long as I think I can, to the point that my body says to me, I need to breathe in, right? But by me holding my nose, it's a weird thing that Bliss showed me, but you can actually keep breathing out for a long period than you ever realized. You've got a ton more air still in you, and yet your mind's telling you fully exhaled. right?
Okay.
So I'll try and show it to you. So so I'm here. So basically, you breathe out, and you're holding your nose, and then you effectively swallow, and you can pull more air up from your neck, from your throat. So your body's actually holding. So even when your body you get to the end, and it's like, right? So you. So you can keep pulling more and more air out. And so stuff like this, it's like, that's just weird. Initially, when I first started doing this, I believed that I've kind of like learned to tell myself now that there's always more air. Your body just holds all this residual air.
Yeah.
Because it's conning you, like it will with food, or you know, you need, because you start getting into this almost like survival, and your body's programmed to keep you surviving, but actually you've got far more leeway in you than you realized. So what your body tells you, and what actually, what your mind's telling you, and where your body's at, two different things.
Yeah, I guess it sounds a bit kind of like in that regard to survival. If I get hungry, and especially if people are emotional, if they don't have a good control of their mind per se, then people can get desperate, like after not eating for 24 hours or something, and they can go into a whole crisis. But if you're used to it, if you've been like on a long fast or something, then it's just the brain freaking out. But in reality, it's like it would be like a long time until you would actually really starve out. So I guess it's similar. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you make the priority of your training, even your competitive roles, unless you're competing like that weekend, if you go and make your breathing and keeping your heart rate down during the role, you'll just notice so much more about what's going on. And particularly when you're rolling with, like, if you're rolling with somebody, like, you often get this thing of, I roll with this person who's much bigger and stronger than me, and they just smash me every time. They pass me to side control, and no matter what I do, I feel like I'm, it's just the same. Nothing, it doesn't improve any time against them. This is like, so this is partly around expectations. Well, what are you actually expecting to get from this? So you're somehow thinking that this is an unacceptable result. Well, actually, they're just bigger and stronger than you. So all things being equal, unless you have more skill than them, this is what's going to happen. So what should my expectation be? Well, actually, if normally it takes them what feels like 2 minutes to submit me, and often when you play people back, you say, actually, it's about 5 minutes, that match, right? But again, perception is very different unless they're timing their rolls and they know, and it's being recorded, right? So we one of the things we've done is we've put cameras up all around the gym. Everyone is signed. We've put up, camera holders, I should say. Everyone's signed to say, like, no problem. This is only in the adults classes. We don't do it in the kids class, but in the adults class, everyone's signed it and said, yeah, no problem. And so there's cameras up all around so people can record their matches, because you get these questions all the time. Oh, I feel like, he just smashes me. It's like, actually, that was 6 minutes. And the guy outweighs you by, 50 pounds. It seems 6 minutes to submit you. You've both been training as long. Actually, that wasn't the nightmare that you said it was. It might have felt bad, but you told me it was like just smashing you immediately. That's not actually what happened. So if it's 6 minutes, if you can start making it, well, actually, I'm gonna try and make this 8 minutes. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to breathe perfectly all through this. The emphasis first and foremost is going to be my breathing. Secondly, I'm going to find ways in which I can irritate them and I can steal breaths. There's certain positions where we can just steal far more breath, like close guard is somewhere you can slow down the game, get the game at your pace, particularly if you're smaller. And so then it starts to become, I can slow this down. And then I start finding that things that I'm doing in closed guard, bottom and top, actually apply to side control, bottom. And I've never noticed these similarities. So John Frankel started talking about full retraction and full extension, right? It's a common thing, you know, he talks about full extension, full retraction. And I've started now realizing things around, you know, which way our thumbs point is huge in terms of side control bottom. When I'm defending side control, when do I want my thumbs turned in? When do I want my thumbs turned out? Because there's full retractions here and here. So you start seeing the game in a completely different way. You become more receptive to things that your coaches are saying. Right. Because you can see them. The game is slower. So you're playing this slower pace, but then all of a sudden it's like you're playing a different level of game. And then it's suddenly starting taking people 10 minutes. It takes that same person 10 minutes to submit. And then they're not submitting you anymore. And then they're getting frustrated. Then they're using more energy. And then you're really making progress, because their thing is if there's someone that's usually, you know, using a lot of strength and they're smashing you and they're using their attributes, their goal is just to submit you. They're not working on improving their breathing. They're not even sure why they might even remember after the roll why they submitted you. They might remember the submission. And I know this is true because that's how my rolls used to be when I was, you know, a competitive athlete. All I wanted to do was just submit everybody in the room and submit them again and again and again. Those were my goals when rolling. And I wasn't getting particularly better doing that. I was getting better in spite of myself. So I feel breathing is just huge. And then people talk about it for other things, just in terms of like getting to sleep at night and, you know, dealing with these day-to-day interactions. You start to see the parallels of when you roll with somebody and used to strip the grips. You know, there's a conversation going on in those rolls that often is the same thing people manifest in their work, you know, in their relationships with people. You know, have you done this? No, I've not done that. And we're all kind of holding our breaths, and we're, you know, it's all chest breathing. Everything starts, the posture starts changing, and just actually, you know, thinking about your breathing and getting your breathing back into your diaphragm, and you know, thinking about being present. And suddenly you realize, well, actually, maybe they didn't ask me that in the way in which I felt like they were having a go at me. Or it starts to change your relationships, getting to sleep at night, so you sleep better at night. So then, you know, you then wake up feeling better. And it's just, you know, I think we breathe something like, I think she says, Blissa says, like, we breathe 20,000 times a day. So if there's one thing that we can really easily go about optimizing, it's breathing. And as Elon Musk said on Joe Rogan the other day, you know, what is it? Everyone has to die by stopping breathing. It's one of the most basic things we can do. And then you look at things like COVID, and you can't help but look at how I used to breathe. And as someone with, you know, two of these inhalers, I would have been probably considered in a, you know, a higher risk category. I would have defined myself in a higher risk category. It would have, and if I had got, you know, I mean, I may have had this, may have not, but if I had a respiratory type illness like this that affects the lungs, I would have been in a far worse place than I'd ever be in now, because I know how I need to breathe when I need to do it, when I need to switch it on.
Speaking of that, how did you adjust your breathing throughout just daily matters? And do you categorize them, like your work breathing or your kind of neutral breathing, or did you adjust or tweak anything in those regards?
Probably. I mean, I'll be honest, I've probably not done it. It's been more so for sleep, primarily. And then I'm finding I'm enjoying jiu-jitsu so much more since I've dealt with this issue. And like, you know, I've started lifting weights again and doing all kinds of, you know, so I'm aware like that it's impacting how I'm lifting weights, and that's great. In terms of my kind of general work, I feel I'm a bit calmer than I used to be generally, but I think that's more because of I'm sleeping better. But people do all kinds of things along these lines. I'm kind of aware of it, sometimes. And I think it just, but I'm not consciously breaking it down through the day, which I could definitely do. I think it depends on how much you want to, some people like to, I can see how somebody gets into this, they'll end up micromanaging their entire, and you do go through phases with it as well. So like sure. I did Balissa's instructor certification, and certainly over that like 12 weeks of that, I was like all the time doing it. Now it's become much more just a thing that I switch on for sleep, exercise type things I'll switch it on for. The general kind of day-to-day, I just feel I'm calmer because of that. But I personally don't want to spend my entire day just thinking about breathing, providing I'm happy, right? So if I'm enjoying my day, I'm not going to I don't want to micromanage my life to that extent personally. But I could see how, like, if you were really wanting to just go on a stint, or you're dealing with a lot of stress and grief and other things, it becomes more and more important to take more time out of your day to go and, practice these exercises and so on. But I've tried to integrate with my jiu-jitsu, so I'm not micromanaging it to that extent.
But even like on more simple terms, would you notice yourself breathing more with the diaphragm, or just completely just let it go and let the breathing happen during day-to-day matters?
So I nasal when I'm not talking for long periods. Like now, I'm nasal breathing a hell of a lot more, just generally. That's definitely happening. Mouth breathing is not good for you. Okay. There's no science out there. There's nobody out there that is saying, and there is tons of stuff on respiratory system and breathing generally. If you go onto Google Scholar. I was having this discussion with Casey the other day, and if you go onto Google Scholar, there are tons and tons of things on breathing because of all the asthmatic research, and it's just incredible how much there is out there. But yeah, I think so you do bits of it, and you can definitely integrate it more and more into your life. But the major thing has been the nasal breathing. And just like when I find myself getting anxious over something, I mean, there are times when I get anxious over things. Actually, I use anxiety. Anxiety is something that you can use to drive yourself to action.
Sure. Yeah.
And I've definitely used it as probably too much, definitely in sport, but you can use it that way. But there's times you don't want to be anxious. You just, you don't need the stress, and you're tired, and you just want to calm yourself down. And so I just see it personally, I see it right now as a tool, really powerful tool. But it's just a tool, I think.
Sure. One more question, if I may, on the technical level in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. When I'm envisioning all of the breathing techniques, the question comes to me, so in the initial stages, especially if someone is like really athletic and they're trying to use the attributes against you, and just doing a lot of movement, would you then focus on breathing out more so that you would have enough energy to deal with that?
Yes. Yeah, I definitely do that. I would exhale more to begin with.
Okay.
Yeah. Get it all out. Get it all out, and then try and just do things that you'll start to notice this more. Try to do things that get a ridiculous response for very little effort. So anytime you put your hand in somebody's collar, they usually are gonna react to that. So you put it into their collar, but you're not attached to it. You just go and put it in there. And but your breathing is your main thing. So you go to put the hand in the collar, they go crazy. They start stripping the grip. Take it out for them. So I take it out. Are you getting it back? And it starts to become that. And the more confident you get in having that conversation, to me, it's the same as if you're having a conversation with some boss at work where they're like, and you, instead of raising with it, you kind of, you just, okay. And you let them, right, you done? And while they're doing that, you can think about, while they're doing all of this, it's the same idea. You're just trying to like.
Good.
because they're burning all the energy.
Hmm. That reminds me, you mentioned Casey Jones, and we rolled once, but I can see what you meant when you spoke about him, because one of the things he did, and then that's the first time I experienced it. I actually kind of got a glimpse of it, but then I started seeing it applied here and there. It was him shedding my mouth and nose.
Yeah, he likes Wagner Rocha, I think.
Sorry?
He likes Wagner Rocha. He's similar passing style, Wagner Rocha.
Right.
Wagner Rocha, yeah, that guy.
So that was like, especially for like early blue belt, it's just, it induces a panic. I mean, just like you just freak out, and especially if you haven't experienced that, you just want to get that away from your face as fast as you can. And I asked him as well directly. I was kind of impressed by it. I was like, oh, that's an interesting approach. And I asked him, so is that like do you consider that to be a submission, to just completely choke the person out like that, or is it more like a method just to create that type of panic? And the answer was clearly, it's just inducing panic. You're not trying to choke the person out like that. But I found that's a smart way to go, and it just seems you're kind of doing that even. That's kind of like very direct, that method, but then if you mention the collar, it just almost seems like even more sophisticated way to provoke more usage of energy from your partner, and then you're kind of keeping yourself energetic and heart rate low, and you just provoke the other person to kind of create that disbalance. So
if I see my main training partner, like if I see he starts mouth breathing over the course of the roll, and he knows like a lot about breathing now, but like if I see he's mouth breathing, like to me that's like I'm winning. That's how I'm measuring, right? I'm not if he submits me, I submit him, great. That's great. That's notch on the jiu-jitsu bedpost, right? But that's not the goal anymore. The goal is just to irritate, like get that, you want their heart rate up and yours down. And so I try not to go back to this thing like that now for me right now. And a month or so ago, like I don't ever want Casey on my back, right? But like that isn't anything to me now. If he's now doing this, well then now the problem's escalated, right? But if it's just this, that's actually how you want to be rolling. You don't want to be panicked because you can't breathe in or out of your mouth.
Yeah.
And if you can start finding ways that you don't need to be mouth breathing in your roll, you can just roll with this shut. The whole one of the things that the Butenko method talks about is if you can breathe all the time through your nose, their argument is it's like high altitude training. So your body starts to become more, according to them, your body starts to become more efficient in red blood cell production. So it's effectively a way of, and they do a lot of things around breath holds. Now that's not, I don't particularly use like how long I can hold my breath to increase blood cell production. I've played around with it. It's not something I carried on with, but the basic idea of it is that there's almost nothing there's almost no good reason apart from when you're in a competition to mouth breathe. If you're in a competition, of course you'll mouth breathe, right? You're there to win the medal, but you really want to try and avoid it when rolling. You just want to keep that mouth shut. Make the roll not about the submission, getting the submission. You're here to learn, and breathing is the key part of that for me. And I think if you do that, you're going to, I just look at it and think, God, I'd be so much better at jiu-jitsu if I'd started. For me, breathing is the base now. So I said to you before the call, when I've got people joining me now, beginners class, the first thing I'm going to do, I started doing before this, the first thing I'm going to do when we reopen is breathing. Like if you're a beginner coming to my gym, you have to learn how to breathe, and not like your idea of how you think it is, or you did it once under somebody. You learn how to do it. And if I have to put you under scarf hold, I will. And you'll discover that probably what you think you need to do and what you actually need to do, you can't breathe through that. Because it really doesn't have much to do with jiu-jitsu, breathing in scarf hold, in terms of not tapping to it's to do with your technique, without question. Breathing technique is what stops you, in my opinion, tapping to scarf. The actual, the pressure. So if you start with beginners like that, where they can breathe and they're calm and they're not anxious, and that thing that beginners have where they grip you like that. If you can the sooner you can get rid of that, the sooner you're going to get everybody into an environment for learning.
Yeah.
And they'll just accelerate from there.
There's a few more things I'll want to add in and share, but directly to what you just said about bringing up a question. You keep mentioning the correct breathing techniques, and you mentioned a bit about what to apply where doing the role, but generally for someone who's listening into the conversation and trying, including myself, trying to understand, so what is that correct breathing? Could you give a bit of an explanation of what would be correct versus wrong?
Yeah, so there's two major things that that sort of Dr. Blier-Vranich has sort of shown me on this, as she teaches as her approach. So the first thing that we would do when somebody comes into the gym is we look at what we call the location of motion. So effectively, when you breathe, you're trying to get out of this habit of moving your shoulders. So the first thing I'm looking for in terms of somebody breathing, I don't want them moving their shoulders. Okay. So when you say to somebody, take a deep breath, and you see all these MMA fighters go, right, that's just a location of motion fail. Shoulders are moving, they're breathing into the chest, and they're using the mouth, right? So that's usually a big giveaway. And we've had doctors you go to the doctors, they put the stethoscope on when you've had a bad chest, they go, give me a big deep breath, right? So they cue this terrible approach. So that's the first thing. So what we begin really by getting people trying to breathe into their belly. So to begin with, for a lot of people, particularly if they're not athletes, they may even struggle to move their belly particularly, right? But the basic idea is that when they inhale, we want to see that the belly going out, like you're showing the biggest belly you can, right? And then on the exhale, we're initially we're looking for the belly button to go to the spine. So that's the basic technique. And then the other part that we talk about is the expansion of the abdominothoracic cavity. So this used to be called vital lung capacity, but essentially these, you've got your intercostals, and this area around here, you can really open this up with exercise, right? So we begin by, I did this for SBG members. I showed how you can measure this. You just get a Taylor's tape measure. And so you do your biggest inhale, biggest exhale, you measure the before and afterwards, and then you basically start doing these exercises which focus on improving your location of motion. So ultimately, we're aiming for a 360 diaphragmatic breath. I've started now playing a lot more with this bracing approach, specifically for jiu-jitsu, or for much of jiu-jitsu, but that's really where we take it. So you do these exercises, and there's a couple of exercises in particular that Dr. Belissa recommends, and they are really focused around opening up this part of the cavity, and it expands. If you do these regularly, you will dramatically increase. You can put inches on your inhale and exhale rate. Now, why do you want to do that? Well, because your lungs are not the problem in terms of getting air in and out. It's basically this cavity locks you in, and one of the big kind of drivers of aging or anti-longevity is people's rib cages naturally narrow as they get older. And so what happens is your rib cage, as you get older and older, and then if you've got osteoporosis or your spine starts curving, the whole thing just starts grinding around your lungs, and your lungs just have no actual room to expand in. And yet if you take a human lung or a horse's lung or any lung, a mammal's lung, and you go and pump it, you put air into it, these things can expand way beyond the limits of our body. So that's where Belissa starts to take it for athletes that work with her. She starts taking this onto another level, which then gets us onto this whole thing around gas, right? how often do you have, and you know, you're a blue belt now, you've been around martial arts for a long time, you'll have heard people say when they first roll with you, white belt first roll with you, I've got to work on my gas. And it's basically garbage. Their cardiovascular system is not their problem.
Yeah.
Their problem is their respiratory system to begin with. You know, your ability to improve your respiratory system is really not sports specific. Whereas most of what people talk about when they talk about gas and their cardiovascular system, actually, you know, you want better endurance at cycling, you need to cycle a lot more, right? If you want more endurance at running, you need to run a lot more. And while there is a little bit of crossover, I think the general consensus is there's not much, because there's a skill to these things as well.
Yeah.
But the thing that you really can hack is your abdominothoracic cavity, because your lungs can expand and expand and expand. And these bits here are incredibly malleable. So there's some specific twisting stretches. And then where this gets then really interesting is the difference between anatomical yoga type breaths, where we're breathing with the spine for typically for kind of developing flexibility, and then actually breathing biomechanically and breathing to increase your abdominal thoracic cavity. So the actual breathing methods there are almost the direct opposite for the abdominal thoracic cavity to expand this. The same techniques as in yoga, or similar techniques to in yoga, but the completely different breathing approach of when you inhale and when you exhale. So this is something that Blissa talks about in Breathing for Warriors. It's pretty mind-blowing when you start doing it. So if you've done yoga, it's great because you know a lot of the exercises, but the breathing approach is completely different. And one of the things I found that's been very different between Blissa's approach and some of the other breathing instructors that I've read about, who are great, and don't get me wrong, they've got some incredible knowledge and you can learn from pretty much everyone out there, is the focus on the kind of the biomechanical elements of this in terms of this opening up, but also where she talks about the kind of chemistry and using things like, so I've got like a hypoxia monitor. So if you want to start like playing around with how much SpO2 you've got in your bloodstream, you know, you can put these little monitors on your finger, and you can actually like practice your breathing techniques, and you can see how they're influencing not just your heart rate, but the amount of oxygen that's going around your system. So you can actually start like, you know, getting instant feedback with these, and you can actually see these techniques having an impact. And I'm not somebody that likes listening to, you know, what I call the woo-woo that you typically get, where there's just no scientific basis for what they're saying. Yeah. I like the measurements. I like seeing what my heart rate is before I was doing this, when I was rolling, and then afterwards. And you're 25 beats a minute less, and you've just basically had the same result, jiu-jitsu wise, you know, same level of performance against somebody, but you're 20 beats a minute down on it, and your SpO2's up. And you can feel it, you can tell it, but you can also scientifically measure it.
One more quick technical question. I dabbled with some breathing techniques here and there, and there's definitely various types of approaches. And one of them, which I was introduced to, is that when you're doing a full breathe and like officially using the diaphragm, you're not only expanding the lower part, but eventually you're also expanding the chest. Based on the method that you practice, is the chest completely neglected? You're just leaving it?
No, so
it's all about.
Yeah, no. So you can. So there are. So we do the 2-part breath. So the 2-part breath is like if I was to say a ratio of it, it's kind of like a 95-5. So it goes 95 into sort of diaphragm. And like 5 into the chest, and then it's like a full exhale. And it's part of what the 2-part breath is a really interesting thing that Blissa shows. So it essentially ends up, you can do like 10, 15, 20 minutes as an athlete of this, you build it up, and it's kind of like literally just exercising your breathing muscles. So I had all my guys do it the other night. We got together on like a, you know, one of these Zoom type things. And they were all saying afterwards how much their intercostals were aching afterwards, and we're just laying down breathing. So that's the 2-part breath. And then it goes into we take it into like what we call a meditation for people who can't meditate, right? It's kind of like just a mindfulness. So you can use this like 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes of like balls to the wall breathing. So in answer to your question, no, there are times you can involve the chest, like with this 2-part breath. And also as well, like some people talk about call it crocodile breathing, or breathing in the back, or frog breath. I've heard all these different things. But ultimately, as you start to develop these methods, you do start breathing into your back. And so when you're all twisted up, you've ended up getting yourself into a bad jiu-jitsu position, the sort of thing you never want to be in, right? But you've ended up upside down under somebody, and all their weight's like smashing on your leg in a smash pass. And you can start breathing into your back. So even though you're all contorted, you can start, you're using the entire diaphragm, because the diaphragm, of course, isn't just at the front, it goes all the way around the back. And getting people to feel even just where their diaphragm is all the way, it goes much lower onto your which goes around your back, it's much lower. And it's just feeling that. And then even just feeling as you're inhaling and exhaling, you can actually feel the breath going into those areas. So even when you're all contorted up, and people will sometimes say, particularly when they're beginners, or if they've got some 250-pound beast on them, and they'll tap out, and it's like, oh, I just couldn't breathe. And it's like, no, you could have breathed. It wasn't that you couldn't have breathed in that situation. You might have ended up getting your neck twisted the wrong way or picked up an injury, but it wasn't really that you can breathe in almost any situation where you're above water. You can breathe. It's just your mind telling you this isn't good. But then it's like, oh, I can't breathe. No, you're just panicking. Right. You can always find a way of, you can almost always find a way during jiu-jitsu of rolling. If you're fit and healthy, you can find a way of breathing.
Cool. So there's just a couple last kind of thoughts I wanted to bring to the table in reflection to what you said. One of them is kind of connecting all the dots in regards to Rickson Gracie. I remember hearing him say that he is kind of an advocate for long rolls, that he doesn't like the fact that competitions are, just like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and he's all about rolling until, someone taps out. And I think that's kind of probably how he fought most of the times in the past. And that intuitively, that made sense for me as well, because I thought I liked that strategic approach, because that makes sense. You're playing the long game versus if you have 5 minutes. And I guess it's maybe psychological, but then there might be that idea of, oh, I still need to get the tap because then I'll get the next partner. But at the same time, if you're all rolling the 6 rolls, 5 minutes or so, by the end of it, everyone is more or less equal, because you all spend that time, and you can still see that improvement in you if you're keeping your game on a low heartbeat. But then just kind of reflecting about it all, now when you spoke about the breathing and the importance of it, and how Rickson emphasized it, it makes all the more sense that he would be for the long game, because it's kind of that difference between slow heart rate, fast heart rate, provoking the fast rate, that it just, with every minute, it's my impression that it just changes the game more and more and more. So would you agree with that kind of idea?
Yeah, I mean, yes, definitely. I also think that because breathing is fundamental, it's still, even if you're only going to roll for 2 minutes, well, then it's because it's fundamental, it's still massively important.
Right.
But you're right. Over time, that advantage begins to gain and gain and gain without question. Because if you're not breathing correctly, the longer you're not breathing correctly for, the more of a deficit you're effectively building up, right? You're being anaerobic. You're effectively lifting weights when you're not actually gaining anything from it a lot of the time. If you look at what, I like this analogy of lifting humans. You don't want to be lifting somebody or having to lift a bit of them if you're not gaining from it. Yeah. But either way, breathing is still going to, if you've got, when that's condensed down, like you say, you've got to get the tap, you're getting ready for competition, then breathing's important in those short sessions. It's also important for your recovery. It's important between matches. You know, somebody who doesn't know how to breathe between matches versus somebody who does, who's going to recover quicker between the match? Who's going to recover between their sessions? Who's going to recover better from injuries? Who's sleeping better? It's just an unfair advantage. But yeah, I mean, I think longer rolls are also better from just from a skill development perspective, and what's most important and what's going to carry you through. And I think if you're smaller, you know, it's just demoralizing short sessions where it's 5 minutes and, you know, you're rolling at someone who's very big. It's going to take you a while to tire them out. When you're a white belt, that's the hard. What, you know, you don't really want to be robbed. You want to be doing isolations more at that time. But I think short matches, it's great to go and do competition, but for your development, longer rolls are better. And I think, like you say, breathing links into all of this.
Yeah. And just one last thought that came to me from what you said, and kind of agreeing with from my own experience about the memory aspect of breathing. When I look at my MMA fight and the few competitions I had of jiu-jitsu, there was definitely a very high heart rate from even like before it started, because there's the adrenaline, there's the stress, and I do remember bits and pieces of it, but it's still like just kind of puzzling it together, or some type of exam. Like when I remember my Aikido exams from back in the day, also I would just kind of have a vague memory of the whole thing. There wouldn't be like a clear memory of it all, but then would make sense that that's very much related to the high heart level, because the pace is just so fast and the brain doesn't get all the information, and the opposite would apply.
Yeah, it's managing, you start realizing Rickson always does this. Rickson's punchline is always, he talks about all the things that breathing benefits for you. And his punchline is that he adds at the end is nerve. And you start realizing that this is all about managing arousal. Right. And obviously arousal has sexual connotations, but arousal is, you know, it's just, the whole thing is really the same, right? You're not in a relaxed state of mind. So you're becoming aroused on some level, right? And what controls that fundamentally is going to be how you breathe. If you slow your breathing down, it's very hard to get aroused, or much harder, because because you're actually focused internally. You're not looking at what's going on around you, however marvelous it may be, right? So, and that's the thing Rickson talks about is going into matches. He'd say, you know, he was going into his fights perfectly calm, or you know, he would manage his heart rate to where he wanted it to be. And I heard Miles Lucas, who's a black belt under Dave Camarillo, a really great guy. He's gone and done the whole Wim Hof method. He's spoken to Rickson about breathing as well. He's into the whole thing, reads everything on it. And he was saying in a forum recently, when he competes, he doesn't get an adrenaline dump anymore. Yeah. And when you say to athletes now, you know, I talk to athletes about breathing, and they say to me, "Oh yeah, you know, I've been thinking about a lot of my breathing and blah blah blah. When did you compete? Oh, I competed the other week. Did you get an adrenaline dump? Oh yeah, I always get an adrenaline dump. Well, there's a lot more you can do on this without question, because there's just so many people don't get adrenaline dumps now who, you know, are using breathing. And you just think, God, how much of an advantage is that, being able to roll how you do in the gym in competition? Because I think that finishes, you know, I think that's the reason most people don't really achieve their, if you talk to them about, you know, why do you not produce what you can produce in the gym? They'll say it's psychological, it's the mental cage, it's that walk to the cage. You know, Carl used to, as you mentioned, Carl used to have people walking out to the cage. We'd throw things at them, and all, you know, there'd be all sorts. We'd mimic it in the gym, them doing that walk, and you know, you had fake blood going in there, and but you're trying to recreate that because it has such an impact on you. Sure. And I think breathing is the other side of it. It just that ability to just keep you level is huge.
Cool. Well, and I think I have the last question, which is for people who are interested about this. I guess there's two levels. There's the person you learned from, but now you're certified and yourself, and you also have all the jiu-jitsu background. So for people who would be interested to follow up and learn more, so the two-part is where can they find more information about the creator of the method, and second part, can they connect up with you somehow? If there's enough interest, are you planning or intending to do some kind of open Zoom sessions or private coaching or something like that?
Yeah, sure. So Blissa Vranic has got 2 books out. I mean, if you Google her, she's pretty easy to find. But her first book is called Breathe. You can get it on Audible as one of your credits. Her second book is Breathing for Warriors. She's got her own website, and you can certify as an instructor, under her. So she offers an online course, which is fantastic, and I thoroughly recommend.
Quick question about the books. Would you recommend reading one and then the other, or any other way?
I think Breathing for Warriors is more updated. So it's got all of her latest things in there. There's some differences of how we work on that side of things with the abdominal thoracic cavity. I struggle, it's a bit of a tongue twister, that one. So there's that. I would go with Breathing for Warriors first. She's also she's really great. I messaged her and she just answers. She really is somebody who genuinely tries to help people. She didn't know me from Adam. I just said, I think the book's really great, and a few of us have bought it. And she's like, yeah, let's do let me answer some questions on it, right? And it kind of went from there. So she's a natural enthusiast. So if you have questions, she answers them. She comes on forums and on all kinds of things. I've posted comments, or sometimes I don't know the answer to things, and she just pops on and says, oh, well, you might want to look, to someone who's asked me where I don't know, you might want to look at this or that or the other. So I've also done some videos in the SBG members worldwide at the moment. Pretty much I put anything like this, I put in SBG University. I'm currently kind of working on what I'm doing. So there's a load of videos in SBG members worldwide that I've put out. I've put some in my own Facebook group, which people are welcome to join. It was originally for members of my gym, and then I kind of opened it up to people I've met at seminars, and it's kind of just ended up, look, if you're interested, and you can, do me a review on Google if you enjoyed it. But I put videos in there, but the main ones, to be honest, probably going to be SBG University. Subscribing to SBG University, there's just so much good material on there. And I'm going to be putting some content out there specifically with respect to breathing in jiu-jitsu positions, how to actually apply breathing in it, which positions to start with. Scarf is the natural place to start, but how to breathe in these different positions, how I'm working on the breath, how to breathe in standing, when to use the bracing method, and so on. So I'm going to be I'll be putting that into SBG University, at the right time.
Very cool. Already, I'm lucky. I'm already subscribed there, so so I'll check it out.
It's crazy.
And if anybody wants to contact you personally for either private coaching or just some questions, where can they find you?
Facebook's probably the best place. In terms of Glyn Powditch, I'm probably the world's best Glyn Powditch. It's not a particularly popular name. So yeah, you can find me on Facebook, message me on Facebook. I'm pretty easy to contact.
Great. Perfect.
Brilliant.
Well, cool. So thank you very much. And actually the very last bit, it's kind of a half trick question that I like to ask. So if you would summarize the whole talk in a few sentences, like your main core message on that subject, what would you say in that regard?
In one sentence.
Too free.
Yeah. Just if you breathing is the single. I mean, Rickson Gracie says breathing is the single biggest thing you can do to improve your jiu-jitsu, improve your life. and he's correct. It'll improve all aspects of your life and your jiu-jitsu as well. So go down the rabbit hole, become a breathing black belt.
Nice. Oh, that was one sentence. Very good.